Hi, this is Daniel Nahar, and you're listening to the Heart of a Lion podcast. Episode number 5, Nut House. One night when I was a teenager, I got in a big fight with my family at our house. I was leaving the living room area and walking to my bedroom after getting into a huge argument with my aunt. My dad came out of his room as our voices got louder, and now I found myself in a three-way fight with him and my aunt. At some point, I said something smart to my dad, and he responded, "Do you think you can talk to me like you talk to your mother?" And he started following me into my room. I knew at that point something bad was going to follow. My dad stormed in my room and threw me against the bed and started hitting me multiple times. It felt like a combination of slaps and punches, but I was pretty much defenseless and I got my ass whooped. I definitely deserved it though, the way I was acting. After my dad finally got off me, I walked across the house towards the kitchen. My aunt was begging me to calm down as I angrily marched across the house. I walked in the kitchen and went to the drawer where all the spoons and forks were, and I started pulling them out, irrationally thinking to myself I was going to stab my dad. As I was pulling the drawer out, the logical part of my brain kicked in, and I realized it would be a ridiculous thing to do. So I threw the drawer on the ground, making a big mess and knocking all the silverware on the kitchen floor. I quickly walked to the bathroom nearby and locked the door. At this point, I needed to get away from everyone and cool down. I sat on the floor and all sorts of unreasonable thoughts started going through my head. I was thinking about running away, feeling like no one loved me, and other angry teenage thoughts. I locked myself in there for what seemed like hours. Eventually, my family started knocking on the door, asking me when I was going to come out. I refused to open the door, so my family made me an offer. I could either go stay with my mom for the night, or if I didn't want to do that, my mom would pick me up and take me to the hospital. I wasn't exactly sure what going to the hospital meant. It was a pretty vague statement. All I knew was that I didn't want to be at home with the family I just got into it with, and I didn't want to go stay with my mom, which wasn't a much more appealing alternative. I agreed to have my mom pick me up and take me to Kaiser Permanente Hospital. When we arrived at the hospital, I was put in a room by myself while my mom met with the nursing staff. Eventually, I sat down with my mom, who informed me I would be going to a mental institution to get evaluated. I started wondering if I should have just humbled myself and apologized to my family, or even went and stayed with my mom. I didn't know what I got myself into, and now my situation was starting to get real. My mom alerted me that an ambulance was on its way to pick me up. At this point, it was late at night, and I just wanted to hurry up and get to the place so I could go to sleep. The ambulance finally arrived after what seemed like forever, and I was escorted outside, where I was greeted by two younger gentlemen who seemed to be in their early 20s. They put me in a stretcher like someone who was badly injured, and then locked me in place so I couldn't move. It was pretty uncomfortable. While they were driving, I spoke to both of the guys. I asked them if they were taking me to a hospital out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a bunch of tumbleweeds. They laughed and said the mental institution was nothing like the ones they show on TV and movies, and it was just a place where troubled kids could get assistance. They told me not to worry and assured me everything was going to be okay. We arrived at the institution early in the morning, before the sun had risen. They released me from the stretcher and walked me into the building. Once we were inside, another guy came to take care of me, and we said our goodbyes. I have to say, they were great at their job and made me feel comfortable throughout the whole trip. The guy who was in charge of the graveyard shift had me fill out a bunch of paperwork. I don't remember what any of the forms said, except for the one that stated I wouldn't be able to buy a firearm for a couple years after I turned 18. I was so tired, I just wanted to sign the document so I could get some rest. When I was done, he walked me over to my room, and I went straight to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to a doctor standing over me and requesting I sit up so he could draw some blood. As soon as he finished with his tests, a guy on the opposite side of the room walked over and introduced himself to me. We were both about the same age and height and spoke about the events that landed us in this mysterious place. After speaking briefly, we left the room and he gave me a tour of the facility. We spent the morning hanging out and watching TV in the main lobby while we got acquainted before heading over to the cafeteria to eat breakfast. After eating, we had an afternoon group counseling session with the girls who stayed in a separate but nearby building. We started by going around in a circle and introducing ourselves. Everyone in there either had family issues or drug problems. The counselor went over self-improvement tactics, and after the session ended, we went back to our respective units. At nighttime, they gave us little white cups with 2 pills in it and told us to take them after we ate dinner. After we ate, we took our pills and went to the lobby to relax and watch some TV. As time passed, everyone started going to sleep one by one. The pills they gave us were some sort of sleeping medication like Benadryl. Eventually, I felt the medicine kicking in and drowsily got up and headed to my bed, where I quickly knocked out. I woke up the next day feeling somewhat surprised that I was enjoying my stay thus far. It wasn't anywhere as bad as I thought it was going to be. The people I was there with were cool, and the adults that watched us were entertaining. I was surprised though by this little boy named Raymond in my section. Raymond stood out right away because he dressed like a gangster and all his clothes were baggy. If he didn't get his way or someone did something he didn't like, he either started cussing everyone out or began banging his head against the wall. His behavior was extremely erratic and disturbing for someone at such a young age. I learned from the nurses his parents got into a big argument at home and his mom pulled out a gun and killed his dad right in front of him. A traumatic scene I'm sure he's never going to forget. It's such a sad story. My days continued to pass at the institution, but I had no timetable for my release. For all I knew, it could be days or weeks before they released me. I decided to make the best of a bad situation and cooperate with the staff until it was time to go. It got boring at times because most days we followed the same tedious routine. Wake up, eat breakfast, hang out for a while, have a counseling session, and then end the day with a recreational activity and call it a night. I had fun for the first few days, but I started to want to go back home. I guess my roommate felt the same way because he came up with a ridiculous idea. He wanted to break out of the facility and had this crazy escape plan. I laughed at his idea and reminded him we were both almost out and it would be pointless. On top of that, even if we did escape, the police would be called immediately and helicopters would be all over the sky looking for us. We both agreed to kill the fantasy of escaping and just finish our time there in peace. My roommate was a funny character and we ended up getting along great, which made my stay a lot easier. Ironically, I found out he also went to the school that was located right across the street from my house. Small world. Thankfully, I didn't end up staying too long and left in about a week. On my last day, I said bye to everyone and gave a special hug to Raymond. It made me sad to see a little kid like him in such a bad situation. Imagine being a child and witnessing your mom murder your dad. That's going to be something that scars him for the rest of his life, and it will definitely have a negative effect on his mental health. It's been a long time since this whole thing happened, and I still wonder how he's doing and where he's at today. Before I left, I went to the gym one last time to play basketball with my friends. When we got to the courts though, it was crowded and filled with people I had never seen before. As I was walking around, a girl approached me and started making small talk. Strangely, out of nowhere, she asked me how old I was and if I was a virgin. I told her my age and informed her I had never had sex before. She then told me she wanted to take my virginity. It completely threw me off guard. I told her I was about to leave, but I appreciated the offer. She responded by telling me that her dad took her virginity and he raped her when she was younger. I started to feel creeped out and I didn't want to talk anymore. I walked back to my room and reflected on my trip. All in all, it wasn't the worst experience, but towards the end, I couldn't wait to go home. As more people came and went, I started to feel like the facility was getting filled up with strange characters, and I didn't feel comfortable staying there anymore. I felt so relieved when the doctor signed my release and informed my family it was time to pick me up. When my parents arrived, They surprised me by bringing my grandma to lift my spirits. I was happy to see everybody and head back home. My trip to the nut house was complete, and it was time to get back to my regular life.